Tyler, we have wrapped up 2024.
It's
crazy to think. I don't know why.
To think. It was not the easiest year, but I think that it was
the fucking hardest, dude.
Yeah, but like it also was the reason why 2025 is going to be such a great year. Because when faced with adversity, if you're the type of person that wants to step up and continue to go to battle and make changes and realize that, hey, we need to get up on top of this thing, whether it's business, podcast, life, friendship, whatever it is, like 2024 had its challenges. And I think that 2025, like I'm going into 2025 very confident, feeling really good about what we're doing. A lot of that because of our support and our background, and everyone on the back end who makes this all possible. So yeah, we recap 2024, some of the trials, tribulations, but then also like the things that we need to celebrate. And then, what we're looking to do for 2025, which I'm really excited about.
Well, with that being said, let's get into it. Before we do, thanks to our sponsors who help make this happen. This podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. If you're aiming to elevate your projects with a standout feature, look no further than Andersen's folding out swing doors. These impressive doors can span up to 48 feet wide and reach up to 10 feet tall, creating a grand entrance that's sure to impress.
The top hung system ensures smooth and easy operation, making installation and daily use a breeze. Plus, for those working in coastal areas, Andersen offers stormwatch protection, providing peace of mind and durability against harsh weather conditions.
Enhance your builds with elegance and functionality with Andersen's folding out swing doors. Visit Andersen's website today to discover more about this product. This podcast is also brought to you by Buildertrend. Let's talk about the bottom line. In construction, margins can make or break you. If you're still scrambling through spreadsheets or guessing your way through estimates, you're leaving money on the table.
Buildertrend's financial tools like estimates, budgets, and invoices help you maximize profits on every job. You'll have the power to bid smarter, track expenses in real time, and get paid faster because every dollar counts. Schedule a free demo at buildertrend.com/mcdemo and see how you can take control of your profitability in 2025.
This podcast is also brought to you by Velux. Velux's cut, place, and seal installation makes adding skylights to your build easier than ever. Experience worry-free installation with these 3 layers of leak protection, solar panels, and built-in rain sensors, and leave your clients speechless.
Include skylights in your next project and visit veluxusa.com/remodeler to learn more about their industry-leading warranty. So I think we should take some time here. Obviously, 2024 coming to a close. By the time this comes out, I guess after Christmas, I still can't believe Christmas is in 5 days. But I just want to go over some of our favorite episodes from this year, some of the takeaways from them, and then what we did this year through the podcast, between courses, relationships that we established, sponsorships and partnerships that we established, and then speak to where we're looking to go in 25.
Can I interject?
Yeah, go for it.
Because right before this podcast, I sat down with my team here, and it's the first year I actually sat down and was. I don't want to say the first year I was transparent, but I had a much more in-depth conversation with my team and just told, I was just more open with them, just explaining I was reflecting on the last year, which made me reflect on the year before and the year before. And, we had a tough year. I made some mistakes that ultimately cost me, to not meet my targets from a revenue perspective. My focus was in the wrong spot, and to be able to sit in a room with everyone that contributes to what we're doing as a building business and being open about it and looking around and realizing that everyone in the room actually gives a shit and wants to be part of what we're doing is awesome.
Yeah.
And I put together those meeting minutes earlier this week, and I end up dumping in some like financial data. And I was like, should I share this? Should I be open about like, what we want to be doing in terms of revenue, how much profit we made, how much profit we lost over the last year, and or am I gonna is this going to be something that is deters people away or scares them away? And I ultimately decided, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to share it, because it's no surprise that we had a difficult year, and I've talked about before, but we had a bunch of work kind of evaporate on us, and I wanted to give the team an understanding of like, this is why, and this is kind of what was the product of that. Um, and I ended it and basically was like, listen, like, actually, do I have, I want to read
I think
kind of,
it sucks, but at the end of the day, those years and the struggles end up generally defining you one way or another. They could define you in a negative way, or they could be that catalyst for change that you need. And I think that struggling, although difficult while going through it, that like you generally learn the most and grow the most in the face of adversity.
and you know what? And I said something like that where financially it was, what would be considered a loss, and a bad year. But for everything else, the systems, the processes, the structure, the people, that's all that actually all ended up as a very like a huge win. We end up
Yeah.
with some amazing people. We end up with some great processes. And I think that, when you talk about like, hey, was this year a success? We immediately go to
Financial
the
metrics.
financial, yeah, the financial metric of it. But I wrote this. I'm going to read the last paragraph of my. This was kind of like my closing remark, and I'm going to read the last paragraph. But I wrote it, and I was like, man, I wonder if people are going to, understand what I'm saying here, or feel as though they are on the same on the right bus or in the right seat. And the team was like, fuck yeah, like this is, we're here, man, like this is, we all want the same thing. But I'm going to read it here. Every one of us has a critical role in making 2025 a success. To achieve this vision, we must operate as one team, a fully committed that is fully committed to moving in the same direction. Accountability will be the cornerstone of our progress, and those who understand that goal and dedicate themselves to achieving it will share in the rewards of growth and success. However, for those who are unable or unwilling to align with this vision, tough decisions will be made. This is not personal. This is not personal. It is about survival, and it is about excellence. A business can only thrive when everyone is working together with focus and intent. So let's commit to making this year not just our best year, but one that we are all proud to be part of. And I've written similar things in the past, and I have looked around the room and felt as though, yeah, not everyone bought into that.
Yeah.
And this year I feel differently.
Yeah. I feel you probably trimmed the fat, for lack of a better term, and out of necessity. And I think that generally when that happens, like people, if things aren't going well, people have to believe in it to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're struggling, if there's no belief, if there's no faith in the process and the systems, then it'd just be easier to go elsewhere. So I would say that, when things aren't going well, for people to stick beside you or stand behind you and continue to move forward, definitely shows that they're in it for the right reasons, and willing to put in the work and the effort to move ahead.
One of the things I committed to as like my 2025 like priority is what came out of you and I's conversation, me and Julian's conversation, Ken and I's conversation, and the conversation I had from my SWOT analysis a couple years ago, is that, Nick, you have too much going on and your focus isn't where it needs to be. And, I love being busy and I love having a lot going on, but as I've said before, my attention was not where it needed to be. And if I want to have a great anything, I need to commit more to it.
Yeah.
And that, is very much my business and my team here. But I think it goes along with what you were saying with the Modern Craftsman. We, 7.5 years now, we've showed up behind I think the same laptop, to be honest, and recorded this podcast and talked to hundreds of people and had raw conversations about the struggles that you and I have faced and other people have faced. And, I think it was a year ago that we were like, what are we really trying to
Yeah.
accomplish here?
Well, I think realistically, it comes down to time, and it comes down to, like what's important to you. I was listening. I was running last night while Selby was at volleyball, and I basically pawned Tilly off on one of the moms there. And I was listening to a podcast with one of the people who basically brought Shopify to market and went public with it. And essentially, there's certain aspects of our life where we're successful and where that you do well and that you struggle, and typically it just winds up being where you spend your most amount of time for whatever reason. And he was speaking to how Shopify is more than just a job for him, it's his life's work, and he knows that like he could easily turn in any direction and find a quality business mentor, but he struggles finding a lifestyle mentor or somebody to teach him how to be a good father. And he speaks to people who know that they're a good father, and they're like, well, how are you gauging that? What's the metric that you're using? Or is it a comparative? Are you comparing yourself to somebody else? And just realizing that these people know that they're a good father or a good businessman or woman, and it's because they're spending most of their time doing that. And I think that that's what it comes down to. Like, yeah, I could be a good father. I could be a good podcast host. I could be a good remodeling contractor, but most of that success is going to be determined by where I spend my time.
How
For whatever
interesting
reason.
of a mindset, though. Like, you think about what you just said, the only way you get to a point where you feel as though you're good at something is by doing that the most.
Well, it's not even doing it the most. It's just like, even when you're not doing, where's your mind and your thoughts going? Like, what's consuming you the most? And if what brings you the most joy in life is being a parent, while you're at work, you're thinking about being a parent or how you could be a better parent or what you could do to provide for your children. If work is really what drives you to be the best version of yourself, then like when you're a parent, you're thinking about what you could be doing at work. And I think that, we're pulled in all different directions, but I think that whatever drives you the most internally, and there's no right, wrong, every person's different and everyone ticks differently. And typically some of the most successful people struggle with the human aspect of being a father, a brother, a partner, whatever that may be. But you probably business comes easily to this guy, and being a father is more difficult for whatever reason. And I think that that's interesting. And like, I look at the podcast over the past 7 years, and I was looking to get my business up off the ground, pulling away and trying to devote time to the podcast when my greater priority was my own business. And when I was not working, I was thinking about work. When it was the weekends, I was thinking about work. When I was podcasting, I was thinking about work. It wasn't I was not being consumed by the podcast. And I've not necessarily intentionally made a shift. I've just seen potential, and I think probably connecting with our community through consulting was like a huge eye opener for me, just to really get my finger on the pulse of what people's needs are, what they're struggling with, and how helpful the conversations that we're having are. And just realizing like what my greater impact is in this world. And I think I spoke this on my midweek, where I think, right, if I could do a half dozen jobs a year and I'm in business for 40 years, I have 250 240 clients.
Yeah.
I could reach more than that in a single day through the podcast.
Right.
So like what's my greatest impact for, I'm not a huge believer in legacy, but like where am I going to focus my efforts for my life's work from a business perspective, not like a family or a personal perspective, and where is that impact the greatest, the most rewarding, where am I providing the most amount of service? And that's like an absolute no-brainer when I
Yeah.
look at it that way. And obviously my business is structured differently, and I don't have, a ton of employees that I need to keep this machine going. And I built it to a point where the leads and the marketing and everything is self-sustaining. So I've just gotten to the point where like I want to pull back and I want to be able to dump more time into this and to be able to help more people and grow this community. And I just see a huge opportunity for that, which this year opened my eyes to. And I think it was like devoting time to the podcast and forcing myself. It started as a day a week, and then like a day a week wasn't enough, and it's 2 days a week, and I'm like, damn, I could spend 8 days a week on this and still there'd be a ton of potential. And
Mm.
that opened my eyes to what direction I want to take and where I want to go with it, and the potential and the opportunity, and honestly just being able to help people. Like I was on a consulting call this morning, and another younger guy with a family and just trying to find his way in this world and navigate. And so much of it is just like systems, yeah, but confidence and having somebody to bounce some ideas off of. And that's why we started this, and that's somewhat of the catalyst for me pushing forward at this point and devoting more and more time to this.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it going back to when I went through that SWAT, the podcast was something that came up quite a bit. It was like, Nick, what do you want to do? Do you want to build? Do you want to be you want to be quote unquote influencer? Like, do you want to be a podcaster? What is it that you want to do? And and I was faced. They were like, if you had to give up everything, what would it be? I'm like, and what would be the one thing? I'm like, I want to build homes. And they're like, all right, then focus on that. I'm like, yeah, but I also like documenting it and sharing it with people. And I also like talking to people. And I really enjoy the community aspect of the podcast, and how when I'm talking about something I'm struggling with, someone else is like, fuck, I'm dealing with that too. And this is how he dealt with it. And, obviously in that conversation, like, we uncover what were the real things that were bogging me down, that were not the podcast and things like that. There was stuff that I was, had these like, small time investments that, where I felt as though were small time investments, but sprinkled across 100 items, they added up pretty quickly. But the podcast is exactly what you just said. It's like, this has been about helping people and having conversations with people that, are relatable today, yesterday, future, or aspirational, in the sense of like, man, like that, look at someone accomplished here in this industry, and I could take a similar path. Um, and I think, we've always said that the whole point of doing this is to reach a broad network of people in our industry and share knowledge and share conversations and give them the opportunity to kind of listen in, right? Like, be a fly on the wall of a conversation with 3 builders, 2 builders, whatever the case may be. And fast forward, we realize that, all right, well, that's great. And I listen to podcasts, you listen to podcasts, I listen to audiobooks, but I can't help but to think constantly about, like, specifically books, because I listen to a lot of self-help and self-development books, and I listen to these books and I get to the end, I'm like, man, that was super eye-opening. I wish I had a playbook on that, so I could then revert back and say, here's how I implement the things that they talked about in that book. And some books have that, but a lot don't. And I think that's what led us to this idea of, all right, well, the podcast is helpful, but that's if they listen to a particular episode and then get what are the action items out of that podcast? What are the things I need to implement in my business? Which on my end, you know, I'm going through this. I eventually hired a coach was like, I got to work with a coach because, they have the playbook on how I improve XYZ. So I'm going to work with them, and they're going to help me be accountable, and they're going to have the resources and the tools and the templates for me to do that. And going through that process, I'm like, okay, well, I've got a handful of these things already figured out. I don't really need guidance on that. Here's where I need help. But that's what opened the conversation between you and I, where it's like, well, shit, we got some pretty good knowledge baked in at this point, 7 years into the podcast, running our own businesses. We don't have it all figured out, but we got some stuff figured out that, there's probably a lot of people that would love to know what we know.
Yeah.
And not only just that, but come along the journey as we continue to develop that. We talked about that in the last podcast. It's like, lead generation is something that I am all in on right now in my business, and really refining what that looks like. And rather than wait until I see the 5-10 year benefit of that and then share that, it's like, no, come along with me, build with me. This is what I'm doing. This is what's working. Hey, this didn't work. Don't do this.
The other thing is, like, you listen to podcasts and you listen to books, and it's somebody's experience over a 10-year, 5-year, 20-year duration. And so, yeah, they're gonna sit down and they're gonna inventory that entire experience, and then they're gonna pull out those really strong, valid, powerful points and lessons. So I listen to a lot of times when I'm running, and there's no way of taking notes. I could like speak to my phone and send myself reminders, but there's so much information in podcasts and there's so much information in audiobooks that it's almost impossible to retain all of that. And sometimes it gets to be overwhelming where I listen to a podcast and I'm like, damn, this is so much good information. How do I remember all of these takeaways? And then by the time I'm done doing whatever I'm doing, it's kind of, out of my head at that point. I know that even last night I was texting you and it was a lot of the thoughts of what I was really digesting. I was then regurgitating to you as far as like goals for the podcast, what we can be doing to strengthen like partner relationships and bring better content and grow our platform and just continue to reinvest and make it even better. But it's tough. It's tough to quantify that. It's tough to inventory all that and like create a database of all of that information when it's so overwhelming. And I think that what we're looking to do now moving forward is organize all of this information and content in a way that you have access to it, that it's super easy for you to digest. You don't have to spend months and years doing it, and just distill a lot of the conversations, the experience, the knowledge, obviously the information that we've acquired over the past 7 years, 15 years in business, and just provide that to you in a manner that's super efficient and super valuable to you. And that whole process is extremely challenging, but also really rewarding to try and work our way through. And I feel like 2 courses into this, we've made strides that I can't believe. And I'm like, I just can't wait to see what this looks like a year from now, or the next batch of information that we start organizing and putting together. It's just like I feel like it just keeps getting better. Our content keeps getting better. The aesthetic of our information, our content keeps getting better. And I think that we're finding a way to compile all of this information it's not more than you need. And it's really distilled to what's the most valuable to you and then really actionable for you in your business. It's been a long time trying to learn all of this.
It's I think you said it last week. One of the benefits I'm realizing is that as or I think we both said it, as I'm organizing this to share, I'm realizing I have holes in my system.
Yeah.
And then it's like, all right, I'm going to give you the playbook. It works, but it makes me reflect on what I need to improve. And frankly, like when, when we shared the pre-construction course and I go through all the documents, I'm like, all right, this has successfully worked. Like this is, net us hundreds of thousands of dollars in retainers. Like this works. But I realized that I could make this better. Here are the areas that I can improve. And we part of our meeting today was, our Q1 is going to be hyper focused on improving our our sales to pre-con process, because we've realized that, collectively and going through and sharing this is like, all right, there's areas that would be very simple to improve the client experience. Let's do that. And, and when I'm thinking about that, I'm like, this is going to be great for my team, my business, my clients, but it's also going to be great because then I can be able to take that information, plug it in, and be like, hey guys, update. Like we just added we restructured this whole module, and you can go look at it. I mean, just to be clear, like anyone that bought that course day one, like you're getting the updates. Like that's part of it, right? We agreed that you would have lifelong membership on this stuff, and as we update it, you're getting it. And I think that is going back to what we said and going back to the crux of this podcast. Come along with us as we build. Let's build together. Let's do this together. And it's not this gatekeeping. It's not this slow journey of like trying to collect and understand bits and pieces. It's here's the framework, and by the way, we just improved it, and we just improved it again, and this is what we're at changing, and this is what we're adding, and everyone gets to build, these hyper successful businesses because everyone is working together. Like we're already getting feedback like, hey, this course, is amazing, or hey, I would love XYZ, or whatever the case, like whatever it is, there's always opportunity to learn, take, and re-implement.
Yeah. It's been interesting. It's definitely, I know I spoke to this before, but like reignited a bit of a spark in me, and then also just circling back on everything and analyzing my entire business and life with a new lens, kind of taking new information that I have and then applying it to what I could have done differently earlier in my career, what I would have done differently, and then trying to organize those thoughts to be able to share to people, has been quite the trip, to be honest. I just, all of this helps. It betters me. It betters my thought process. It strengthens the conversations I have with people. Like my consulting call today, the guy, I never spoken with him before, and it's like, so I asked him, we asked him what he did, a little bit of background, and I was like, so I know there's no right or wrong answer, but like, do you have specific questions? Is it bigger picture? Like, what are you looking to get out of this call? And he's like, I don't really know. I just, I've been wanting to hop on a call with you. I listen to a lot of your content. I appreciate what you and Nick do. And I don't really know what I'm looking for. Just something's not right. And we started to talk. And most of what I saw was just a lack of confidence and a lack of processes and a lack of going through the motions and sorting out the kinks, and really just understanding what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And it's not as much, hey, you need to put this principle into practice. Like, yeah, there's little things that you can do differently, but it's just a different vantage point that you're not used to. And I think that, a lot of that is from having conversations with people on the podcast about how they do things differently, what their market looks like, what their insights like, and just having a different perspective than the one when you seem to be struggling and you're in your own little world with these blinders on and you don't have anyone to talk to about it and you're just trying to climb your way out of the hole that you've dug. Today was one of those conversations with this guy where it's like, you're so close. Everything that you're doing is like, you're doing the right things. There's little tweaks that you need to make, but so much of this is you stunting your own growth and your own potential. And the way that I'm speaking to you now, I can tell that there's hesitance in your process and you don't truly believe in what you're doing right now, and your clients aren't going to. if you feel that way.
Hey guys, going to take a quick break from the podcast just for a minute to remind you, head over to moderncraftsman.co, that's .co, not .com, and check out all we have to offer. There's a link up there to go to our courses, our merch, as well as some freebies that are going to help you run your business more efficiently. Moderncraftsman.co for everything that you need, including the latest episodes. And if you want the first sneak peek at all that we have going on, make sure you sign up for our newsletter. You can sign up, just fill in your email. You'll get looped into everything we got going on in the back end, including exclusive content for only those part of the newsletter mailing list.
Another really easy way to access anything that you need, Modern Craftsman, is to go to our Instagram, Modern Craftsman Pod. All the highlights are all of our templates, all of our courses, any upcoming workshops that we have, and then also the Linktree has everything that you could need, Modern Craftsman, including all the courses. So if you have any questions, you need to get to something at Modern Craftsman Pod, and if you can't find that, hello@moderncraftsman.co, or you could reach out to me, Tyler, at trghomeconcepts.com.
Now back to the show. I'm going to make a ridiculous reference, so bear with me. But I saw a clip on Instagram the other day, and it was, let me paint the scene. Attractive lady standing outside on a sidewalk, and a car rolls up, and he has money in his hand, and he's like, "How much?" And she's like, "What do you want?" And he's like, "I want you to tell me that you're proud of me, and that that all I do to support this family is appreciated and make me feel appreciated." She goes on to say $200, and he pays her, and she tells him, and it's basically poking fun at men's only desire to be appreciated and respected, and it's basically like buying flowers for a woman. You buy flowers. They love getting flowers. We love getting praise. But what you're speaking to is very similar. And I think that's, we in a marriage or in a household, like that's all we need. We just need to feel appreciated, or we need to feel validated. And it seems sometimes can seem so foolish or minor, but oftentimes it's very difficult to maybe get that in a relationship. But hopping on a call with you, Tyler, or me, or anyone, or walking someone through a project and just wanting them to say, "You got it.
Yeah,
You're on the right track. You're gonna do this," is really powerful. And I think about, the validation, the ability to, or the act of being validated. There's very few feelings like that. I remember growing up, and like, I constantly seeked, validation from people, specifically like, my dad. My mom was always like, "Oh, you're doing good," like would over validate me.
yeah,
Where my dad was more, he was more stern and kind of straightforward. And I worked for him at a young age. And when I would do something that was above and beyond, I wouldn't go and ask him to validate me, but I would try to position something in a way where he'd be like, "Holy shit, dude, like awesome job. Like, I really appreciate you doing that." And I feel like, as I grow up, that's what, when I'm doing, I think I'm constantly going against the grain, and that's what I'm constantly, I shouldn't say constantly, but that's what I'm looking for sometimes, where it's like, just tell me I'm not fucking crazy. Tell me what I'm doing makes sense, or it could work. But interestingly, like, I feel like there's a balance there where it's like, if everyone tells me it works, it's like, all right, then I don't want to be doing that. I want to be doing something that like 90% of the people think I'm tapped, and 10% of the people get on board with me.
yeah, and encourage you.
Yeah, then I feel like, all right, cool. Like, I'm doing something real cool here. Like, this is like, a lot of people, like, I like proving people wrong, but the sense of validation is when it is at a higher stake like that, I think is, really beneficial. And I think, on some of these calls or in some of these conversations, that, to your point, like, they're just stuck.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I think I'm doing the right thing. I'm about to make this decision. And if someone can just say yes or no, like, it could potentially prevent me from, not making a decision at all.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll be on their way up and then one or two things will go, not according to plan or unsuccessfully. And then all of a sudden they start questioning everything. And it's like, well, it worked for so long and you had two bumps in the road and now you're questioning everything. And it's like, you just have to realize those are bumps in the road. Probably not your clients, not your jobs. Just keep moving forward in the direction where you want to be. But I mean, that's who we are as humans. When things are going well, we don't question it. And then as soon as they stop working or don't work, whether it's of your own fault or not, you're like, well, maybe I'm doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I need to change this or that. And it's like, no, stick to your guns. It's been working for a long time. It's gotten you here. Try and find the right fit for you to continue moving in the direction that you want to go. Because obviously this is the direction that you want to go. And I think sometimes hearing that just makes all the difference. And then, you know what? One thing goes your way and you're like, I'm back, baby. Like, I'm right back where I need to be. I mean, I've seen that happen so many times. And I think a lot of it is just understanding in business that you're going to have these ebbs and flows. And if you continue to do the right thing and continue to really assess what you're doing and not turn a blind eye to things and really keep your finger on the pulse of your business, that you'll wind up being okay. Um, how about moving forward with podcasts? Like there's things that I want from next year from our listenership that I like. I would appreciate more feedback
Yeah.
as far as what we're doing, whether it's coursework, whether it's guests, what you want more of, what you want less of. A lot of what we're doing is dictated by what's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're on the other side of this conversation. So having feedback and taking the time to craft that in a constructive way for us so that we can continue to refine what we're doing.
Yeah. I said to Tyler a week or two ago, and I was like, hey, we got to shake up the podcast. And I was like, it's getting a little stale for me. And I feel like we hop on here, we do the same thing over and over. And, there's certain conversations and interviews that we go through, and it's really like, I'm sitting here and I'm super engaged. And then there's others that I feel like I'm just checking a box.
Yeah.
And to Tyler's point, it's the ones that we get the engagement with. There's like an engaging guest or an engaging topic. And, one of the things I said to Tyler, I was like, we got to find the guests that don't necessarily agree with us, like or have a difference in opinion, or something where we can dig into a topic and we just ramble and rattle and like dig into like the most specific things. I think an easy one is AI, right? Like we kind of have touched on AI and how it relates to construction a handful of times. My favorite being Mike Rowe. And, him telling me that a robot's not going to be replacing my toilet. I think he's so wrong. And like, I think not only is he wrong, I think he's underestimating how quickly that's actually going to happen.
Yeah.
And I want to have those conversations because, it's the reality of what we're facing. Sure, we can sit here and talk about the fact that we have a dying workforce and we're only replacing 1 to 5. What does that mean? What, like, really, really, what does that mean? Like, what can Nick, Tyler do about it? What can anyone do about it? Not these grandiose pictures of like, oh yeah, we got to encourage this and encourage. No, fuck. Like, what are we actually going to do? Or what's our other option? Hey, pretend we're replacing 0 to 5. let's play a scenario out. You have no one. Everyone now doesn't work. Like what? Like how do we survive? And my point in this is, you guys engage with us on the conversations that are engaging for us. Where like when we're digging into it, and when the excitement's high, and or we're getting into a real deep topic, whether it's with a guest or Tyler and I, we've asked before. Like I think a lot of you guys recommend or prefer when it's Tyler and I just jamming on something that is usually bothering us.
We're
But okay.
failing.
Or failing, yeah. Like sure, that's because our excitement is high in that topic and we're very engaged with it, and we've done that with guests too. But to Tyler's point, it's like, all right, let's get you guys engaged more. Like how to, give us some real constructive feedback. One of the things I was thinking about the other day when we were doing the webinar is that we had 200 people on that thing, I think. And when we opened it up for Q&A, dude, we got some really good questions, and they were all like hyper specific.
Yep.
And I'm like, man, we could, I know we've done it in the past, but it's like, how do we engage you guys listening, like on like basically live stream this? We've done it similar before, but maybe we do a quarterly live stream where we just sit here and jam on, bring a guest, like rotate guests, and be like, hey, you got 5 minutes. What's up? Kind of like a radio show.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, even just having an audience on, having a conversation about one thing and then answering questions live. I think even from a guest perspective, getting some just like outliers within the industry or within any industry that are pushing the bounds a little bit and not necessarily working from inside the box is always super interesting. And the insight and the perspective is not the same as 90% of the people. And there's risk involved with that, but I think that makes for some really interesting questions and conversations. I'm excited also to just better the craft of conversation from a podcast perspective. And I was thinking about this last night as well, where I don't love small talk. I don't love sitting in a room or going into a room with people who are, friends of my kids and just having small BS conversations. I know we've spoken about this before, but then I don't have an issue hopping on a podcast with somebody that I've never met and speaking to them for an hour and a half, 2 hours. But it's a different skill. I think that podcasting is, the audience connection is different, even more than just like a standard interview. You have to understand how to help a guest tell their story and make sure that there's a logical flow to it. There has to be some depth to the conversation that you're having. You have to make sure that you're driving and steering the conversation. It's obviously like the format of the conversation is longer. It's live. You're not looking for any sort of dead air. So you have to be able to roll with the punches and always stay on your toes. I was listening to a conversation the other day, and the host said that in order to be interesting, which is what we're all looking to do, especially on a podcast, like in order to be interesting, you have to be interested. And I thought that was like super relatable and very simple and very powerful, where it's like when you're having a conversation with somebody on a podcast and you're not with them, it's not this banter where you're saying something and then I'm relating that to my life and how that affects me. You have to truly be interested in what they're saying, and then ask them questions about themselves. And you're going to reflect some on you personally, but the goal is to draw out more of their context and more of their experience. And you have to truly be interested in what they're saying. All of this, while there's a million different things going on and you're trying to steer the conversation and you have questions lined up to ask them, and it's definitely a skill the people who are really good at it are really good at it, and they work at it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not like any other type of interview skill or format that I've experienced before or been a part of. So I do look forward to continue to honing that craft and bettering myself, just being a better podcast host in general, and making for better, more powerful, stronger, captivating, and engaging conversations with guests. And some guests, like, it's hard. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're having guests on who are not celebrities. They're not typically used to having an interview. They're not used to sitting down and talking to somebody for an hour and a half. We are not professional host interviewers. You know, this is not our day job. So it can be challenging at times. And I think that the better that we are at our job and what we're doing, the more comfortable guests are going to feel, and the better that this podcast is going to be for everyone.
Yeah.
I want to I also, from like the content and the coursework perspective, like, I'm really excited. We obviously have some ideas in place for next year to continue moving forward with this, but like, insight as to what works for you guys and what doesn't, and what you find valuable, what you would love to learn more about, what would be a financial investment for you that you find valuable in a course. And I think that if we can focus our efforts on that, it's going to be extremely rewarding to be able to bring that to fruition.
I I also let's I almost want to reframe, like, it is a course, but call it a workshop, a course, a guide, a checklist, like whatever. I mean, I think about all the improvements that we need to make, and there's something internally, something internally that we're working on that just doesn't exist. We've talked to I've talked to hundreds of people about how to go about capturing um the profitability on self-performed labor as it compares to a billable rate budget. Like, like flying through the description of that, but my point is that we have invested literally hundreds of hours at this point on like how to track that, where especially if you're operating a cost plus project model, your profit should not only be the GP that you're making on the fee. There's others, there's self-performed labor, but how do you actually track that in a way that does not require this manual calculation? And that's something, I mean, quite literally, not one project management software that I know of does this, because we've investigated all of them. And we've talked, my team, I shouldn't even say me, like my team has interviewed and talked to other project construction accountants, and like, oh yeah, we don't track that, or we do it this way. And it's, an 8-hour process to actually like reconcile the additional profit. All of that to be said is like, this is who we are as NS builders, and what we're doing internally is like building these things that work and make us, our goal is to be the number one luxury residential construction firm in Boston, and then and beyond, but in Boston. And the way I see us doing that is by building such a strong process internally that we become wildly efficient, and then we get to put all of our extra effort into the client experience, and that's where we win the client. But we can't win the client if we're also trying to figure out the back end. But figuring out the back end is us figuring out the processes. And again, going back to my comment 10 minutes ago, and not gatekeeping that, where it's like, all right, we figured this out. Here you go, guys. One of the things that you and I are working on, Tyler, is the labor, like the labor burden workshop.
Yeah.
We share, like, you can download that sheet that we put together that calcs your exact labor burden for free. But people are like, this is great, but can you walk me through the specifics on how you get here, and like how you actually do this? And then a bunch of people are like, I don't even know why this is important. Like, what does it matter? So, sure. And I'm going through that, and I've been using that sheet for 5 years now, and I'm going through it and putting together all this information, realizing oh, I should be doing that.
Yeah.
And it's this product. This product of like self researching our process, self auditing it, and then giving you, the listener, the best version of it.
I think and that's a completely different conversation, probably in an entire another podcast, that bringing like the self-performing aspect into a cost plus job. But I think at the end of the day, the biggest struggle is almost approaching that as if your margins and what you need as a business at the end of the year, as far as profit goes, probably shouldn't be taking into consideration whether you're self-performing or not. Where it's like our markup percentage and how we're coming to that is dictating our profits. Because I think what ends up happening for most people is, right, if you're making a small percentage on somebody and they do a job that takes a week and they put 5 too many hours into it, like, you actually just made no money on self-performing that job. And if you were going into that project with the mindset of, hey, our percentage markup, our overall builder markup is a little bit lower because we self-perform, and then you overinvest on that aspect of it, like, you're actually leaving a ton of money on the table, um, which winds up being tough. I feel like you have to look at that as like a completely independent business aside from like your general builder's markup, um, which is difficult to do, and it's difficult to break that out. I think it just comes down to like a management perspective. I
Yeah.
even look at that from like my own numbers. If I self perform my work, or I subcontract that work out, or if I hire an employee to do it, and it's like, yeah, you made me a little bit of money over the course of the past 3 days if you execute that project
Right.
to the amount of hours that I estimated it. But like, okay, I'm going to make $300 on you after I pay the labor burden and the overhead and everything that goes into that, right? I'm going to make $300 like without my income tax on that. So it's going to be even less. And then it's like, all right, if it's costing me $65 an hour, like literally 5 hours, and I lost any of my profit for that entire job. So it makes it tough. But yeah, I'm pumped to see where things go. I've like really been digging back into numbers a lot, and I'm putting some coursework and some information together just on simple terms. Like, I think it's really important to look at big picture, what your numbers look like for the year, right? Go through your tax returns and look at what everything is. But like, sometimes that gets so overwhelming, and you're like, well, my overhead is broken across like an average of my cost of goods sold throughout the entire year. And you're just trying to put that, like, you're trying to amortize that cost throughout the average of your jobs throughout the year. And it's like, well, let's figure out those big numbers real quickly, and then let's work backwards. Let's look at an individual job at a time,
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, this job costs this much. Let's look at that. Let's look at what my overhead was for the cost of goods sold for that specific job, rather than like, hey, what's it look like for the whole year? Because it can be so convoluted to say like, yeah, this all makes sense to me, but I don't know where that's coming from. It's easier to be like, well, let me look at a job that's between $0 and $10,000 and figure out what my numbers look like at that. Let me look at $20,000 to $50,000. Let me look at everything above $100,000, and I think that that's going to be a huge indicator of where your numbers should be and what they actually look like, rather than just like, oh, I'm looking at my tax return and I see what everything is, which I think a lot of times can be very misleading.
If you're interested in sponsoring the Modern Craftsman, reach out to us at hello@moderncraftsman.co, and we can send you our sponsorship deck. We're open to sponsorship opportunities of all sizes. Would be happy to work with brands and partnerships that we already support. So if you are one of those companies, reach out to us and let's start the discussion for your 2025 sponsorships. Well, I think it's interesting you say that, because I'd mentioned that to my team earlier. When you look at our jobs individually, they're all individually profitable. It's great. Like that, hey, that job hit the margin that we were looking for. All these jobs are hitting the margins that we're looking for. And when you look at 1/1/2024 to 12/31/2024, it's going to look like we performed like shit.
Yeah.
And, and there's a couple things about that. It's like, well, yeah, we didn't do as much revenue as we had intended by a significant amount. Like we, had my eggs in baskets that evaporated, right? So our revenue's upside down, but my overhead's exactly the same. But then you look at the jobs and it's like, well, it's not the jobs that we did perform that are the issue. It's the fact that we didn't perform as many as we thought.
Yeah.
So it's unfair to say that we're not, it's unfair to say that, we're not executing work profitably when we're just not doing enough of it. But the other thing is like,
I wonder if that's how you're allocating your overhead to those projects as well.
well, I mean, frankly, like if we spend, if I had modified my overhead based on the revenue we actually put in place,
Yeah.
we would have spent less. But instead, my overhead has pretty much been consistent the last 3-4 years, like very close, like within $100,000 a year of each other.
Yeah, so
So
you're basically taking that overhead and putting it across a smaller number when realistically
right.
your overhead should be a higher percentage because you're not doing as much revenue.
Exactly. Where, like, but where I was going with that, it's like the other reality is like, well, your world doesn't just stop at the end of the year. Like if I look at the end of the year, like we're going to show this massive loss this massive loss.
Yeah,
And it's like,
that's honestly sometimes not a bad thing.
not when you're trying to get a loan to renovate your house and shit like that. But my point is that's just a reporting.
Yeah.
On 1/2/2025, like I'm still putting money back in that bucket.
Then it also depends on, like, I don't know. It I just think so many people harp on, what does my tax return look like? And
Right.
I don't think it's a true in it. Like, either you have to take it all, you have to analyze everything together. And I think that you have to understand that that's a living, breathing organism, and that even like the
Exactly.
overhead perspective, right? Your overhead is that percentage that you're going to extrapolate across all of your revenue is based on what you did last year and the percentage of like your cost of goods sold, and your revenue based on what your overhead looks like. And if you're not putting the same amount of work in place and you're not adjusting that to a higher percentage, then like, yeah, your numbers are all going to be off.
Right.
Like your overhead looks super low for these projects, but at the end of the day, it's like, no, that should be 30% higher because we did 30% less work.
Right. And
And if you're not understanding what it looks like as you're going through it, it could all be very misleading.
yeah, the living and breathing organism is a great way to put it because, it is like, yeah, we have this massive loss that will continue to, fill that bucket back up. And eventually it will be full again. Right. And then eventually it, will be spilling over and will be profitable in that sense. But the only time it really matters is obviously from tax perspective, like your tax liability, but ignoring the tax liability for a minute, it's like, it's really just like, all right, if I'm just going to stop work, like what's my liability?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what you're looking at. Like if I stopped work right now and did no more work, how much debt do I have? I'm not saying from like this is a practical way to run a business. Listen, like I've made some, mistakes and I've been upfront about that and I've communicated like how I could have prevented this. If you didn't hear that, it's on last week's episode, but whatever. It's a situation I'm in, like these are like I made the decisions. Here we are. And, and especially after today's meeting with the team, like everyone gets it. I told them, I'm like, this is because those two jobs didn't move forward. Here's what our net loss is for the year. You can see the people, eyes wide open. I'm like, doesn't matter. Like, that's just what it says at the end of the year. We got another X amount of years in front of us. So if we're all good, like, let's keep trucking. Let's keep moving forward. We will focus on the opportunities that award us the ability to build cool shit.
Yeah, for sure. That was a crazy year. I'm excited. I'm excited for next year. Not that anything really changes. It just feels like this time of year, it's like, all right, take a breath, restart. Let's put some different systems into place. But before we wrap it up real quickly, I want to go over super quickly some of my favorite episodes from this year. If you have any off the top of your mind, you can obviously add to this. But Let's see. I guess in no particular order, just kind of scrolling through our Spotify. Obviously, Gary Katz, episode
Mhm.
339. We've had him on a few times. I didn't realize that it was so long ago the last time we had him on, but if you haven't checked out that episode, Gary's just a super humble, really kind, like warm-hearted guy that I think a lot of us looked up to for a very long time and probably placed him on this pedestal of being really isolated from a lot of what the rest of the industry and the world experiences. And Gary was the same as the rest of us, like struggling to feel that he was, not an imposter in this world, struggling with anxiety, with work, business, life, just the same as all of us. Self doubt definitely was consuming at certain aspects of his time. So that's a really great listen. At Was it IBS last year that we sat down with Kyle? That was Stumpin' Horse from
Yep.
our building. So
Yep.
302. That was early last year. We
Yeah.
recorded that in the Rockwool booth. So I've
Yeah.
known Kyle for a super long time. Again, really down to earth guy. Obviously, he's doing a ton of huge things for the industry, a ton of huge things on his own with his own brand. But it's always great to talk to Kyle. Just a really, really nice guy.
Yeah.
303, Vincent Appel from Of Possible. That was a really cool conversation. Just like smart dude, obviously talking about all your work together, but I like the way that he approaches architecture and art and running a business and balancing all of those things.
I love that.
Yeah. And then 305, there's a lot of them in the beginning of the year. That it's not going to go every 2 episodes, but Eric Reinhold, huge inspiration for a lot of what we're doing. Very smart guy. I feel like ahead of the curve from a marketing business perspective. Super talented, very professional, just multifaceted, really good guy. Great episode. 311, Ben Bogey. I love Ben. Unfortunately, I feel like we're at every single thing with him and we're just busy and never get to hang out with him. So it was nice to just sit down and speak with him on a podcast. Really into building science, East Coast guy, New England guy. Really great follow. Works a lot with a lot of the bigger brands and the magazines and periodicals. So check out that one. 312, Charles Kennard. That was our first conversation with him. So he does custom kitchens. So it's just a lot of his processes, what he's doing for custom kitchens, some of the struggles that he has running a business. And then 328 goes without saying, the Mike Rowe episode. Need I really say more? And then the last one for me was just recently, 337, Morgan. We had Morgan on a couple years ago, and just like the difference between her life then and her life now and the strides that she's made is obviously apparent listening to the 2 podcast episodes, but I feel like she's really come into her own.
Yeah.
She's just been growing a ton in life, personally, business, and it's all doing really well for her. And I'm super proud and happy to see her growing as she deserves. And I think that having that conversation with her was just like really reaffirm that for me, and how proud I am of what she's doing and how devoted she is to helping everyone.
Tyler, I couldn't have picked a better list. The one person I'm going to add is 326 Wyatt, the 18-year-old.
Oh yeah.
I think he was put on blast, and he showed up, and he was straightforward. Brushed his teeth at the podcast. Everyone that you listed would have been on my list, but Wyatt would have been included in that. And I think everyone that we've had on the podcast, but those specifically have really brought a different energy to the table, and those are the people that we're talking about. They're conversations that we've enjoyed. And listen, guys, if we didn't rattle your name off, that didn't mean we had a bad episode with you. There's plenty of you guys all the way back to the early episodes that have really delivered. Frankly, I don't think we've released any episodes that we've had not great guests on, but yeah, I think the
As Nick's thinking about the one episode we recorded that we didn't release,
I am
that's just
thinking
playing through
of
my head the
that.
whole time.
It is gosh,
Maybe
there's
we'll release that as a bonus to one of our courses.
it might be our strongest lead magnet.
Yeah,
Um,
seriously.
oh, okay. Well,
That
with
would
that
be
being
good.
said,
Yeah, I
I-
mean, thanks to everyone who's been a
yeah,
part of
seriously.
this year. Every year, everything that we're doing, the coursework, obviously, the workshops we've been putting together, like that, the reception and the support that we have gotten, I'm like very, very proud of, very grateful for, and it's really, really neat to see how much support we've gotten with that, and what that reception's been like. So thank you, obviously, all of our sponsors as well, all of our partners, everyone that has hired us to do anything, who has invested in us, who shared our podcast, listeners. We wouldn't be able to do this without you. So thank you for an amazing 2024, and I'm 100% confident that 2025 is going to be our best year yet. So I'm looking forward to spending 2025 with all of you.
With that being said, see you next year.